Hello all and welcome wherever you are in the world. My name is Ibra Khan at DonatePal, your multi-charity donation platform. That's the mandatory marketing / product placement out the way. Thank you for joining us on another series of conversations entitled Meet the Charity. So what's it all about? As always, it does exactly what it says on the tin. We interview charity members from the DonatePal family and get to know them a little bit more up close and personal. This week, as I'm sure you can see, we're thrilled to have an award-winning author and founder of a charity and NGO, Making Herstory, along with many other things, and we'll talk a bit about that. Onjali Rauf. Onjali, thank you very much for taking time out and joining us. We have shed loads to talk about. Really a lot to talk about. So I'm going to dive straight in and kick off if that's okay with you.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so Making Herstory, what's it all about and how did you come about it?
So Making Herstory is basically, it started off as a book club, just for me to be able to discuss feminist texts and talk about women's rights and books. And with the money raised from the book clubs, we then donated it to women's shelters. But the more we began to, kind of discuss feminism and the things that were happening to women in the world, the more and more stories started to come out from people attending the book clubs about things that they'd seen in the world, about experience that they had of abuse and domestic violence. And the shelters that we were helping came back and said, well, look, we love the funds that you're giving us, but can you also maybe send some toothbrushes and some bed sheets, and can you give us a little bit more than just money? And from that we grew and grew and grew and began to work with trafficking units and Crime Stoppers and trying to signpost people to different agencies. And the whole reason behind why this book club was created at all was because of a tragedy in my own family, where a beloved aunt of mine, my mum's distant cousin, was murdered by her ex-husband. She was trying to separate from him, and due to various failures in the courts and the justice system and police and just all kinds of agencies that were supposed to help her, and noticing what was going on and noticing those failures, I wanted to do something small to my aunt's legacy, to try and help women's shelters and women and children trying to flee abuse. But with anything, once you make it, once you start something, it grows and grows. And now we work with a network of women's shelters across the country, and we have suitcase appeals. We fund hotel rooms for women who are trying to get to a shelter but there aren't any beds available. We've helped women get onto trains to get to safety. We basically do whatever we can. We're not a frontline service because I'm not trained for any of this, but I can signpost people to help, and I can get them on the trains to get to help. So that's what we essentially do. So all of it is really my aunt's legacy, and just in memory of her. And I'm incredibly proud of where we are today. The fact that we're working with so many agencies and we get to do all of these amazing things is it's beyond a dream. So
that's an incredibly tragic moment and tragic story. So how old were you? Do you mind me asking when that happened? And did that incident take place in the UK?
Yes, it took place here in the UK. So I was 24. I think I was 24, just out of finishing my master's, and I'd actually studied women's studies. I'd actually studied feminisms all my life. My mum, everyone was working for various charities, so it was the first incident in my whole family where we had a woman who was so desperately trying to flee this form of horrific violence, and she tried to survive for 5 whole years. We went to the courts with her. We tried to get her separated from this man here in the UK, and it was only after her life was taken, and I read the homicide review report on her case, that I recognised just how badly our systems fail when it comes to women, and then women of colour and visible faith as well. So I wanted to do whatever I could to highlight her story and use that to mobilise other people to come and say, look, we can be a part of this movement to end this. We need to end this epidemic of, it's another epidemic, it's a pandemic around the world of violence against women and children. So it's born of tragedy, but it's one I wish I wasn't on. It was a journey that I never planned in my life, but it just had to be done.
And is that where the name comes from, Making Herstory? That is tribute to.
Do you know what? That actually comes from an argument I had with my history teacher as a kid.
Oh,
So
right,
I was one of those really annoying kids in school. I was always asking really weird questions. And I was a declared feminist from the age of 7, when I recognised it means to, have equality between men and women in all aspects of life. And I remember asking my history teacher, "Sir, why is it history?" Because I took it literally. I was thinking it was about, I don't know, 11 or something. And he was like, oh, it's just history, like what's the big deal? And I said, well, why is it not herstory? And he was like, that's not a word. And I was like, that should be a word. So when it came to the idea of setting something up for my aunt, we came up with making
Did you
herstory.
ever go back to the history teacher and said, "Told you so"?
Funnily enough, I met him in the refugee camps
Oh, did you?
about
Okay.
4 years ago. Yeah, and he'd heard of making herstory, and he finds it really amazing. So yeah, Mr. Brown was his name. He's pretty
I knew I
fantastic.
should. He was like, I knew I should have given Anjali
Yeah,
an A. That girl was
yeah,
going
that would have
places.
helped.
And there's me thinking. Um, Anjali, let me talk a little bit about the other side of you, because you wear a number of caps, and of course one of them is being an incredibly well-known and popular author, especially amongst children. They say everyone has a book in them. You've clearly had several to date. How did you get started, and who were your influences?
So I began writing when I was a kid in primary school, mainly to annoy my brother, because I thought it'd be fun to wind him up with stories. I never really stopped, but I always dreamed of wanting to be like, the authors that I read when I was growing up. So Roald Dahl and C.S. Lewis and, Tolkien. These were my heroes growing up. And I was always questioning why there weren't, more women writers or, especially women and children of color in the books, Famous Five, all the rest of it. So I wanted to be one of those authors, and I wanted to be a writer. So even though I had 17 jobs before I really became an author, I was writing all my, just all of my time, anytime I could get, lunch breaks, midnight, whenever, I'd be writing stories. And it was really inspired by the authors that I read growing up, and I just wanted to be like them. The boy at the back of the class, which is this one here. So this one was really written as a result of,
This one
oh my
here.
God, you have a copy. That
This one
makes me so
here.
happy.
We'll talk a bit
That's
about
really
that.
lovely.
My kids are massive fans, huge
God, I love
fans.
your kids. That was really written when we started going out to the refugee camps in about 2015 under Making Herstory, but it's now become a refugee team. All my stories have been born of people that I've met and people who have been amazing and people whose struggles and issues all our kids are very aware of and they have questions about. And I think that book especially was really just my way of trying to answer questions, because I have nephews and nieces who are gorgeous and they ask me a million questions whenever I come back from the refugee camps. And the book really, the narrator asks a lot of questions, and some of their questions are verbatim what my nieces and nephews have asked me about the camps and what refugees, go through and what they're like. So it's all born of people that I've met and people I've been wanting to be, really.
You've kind of mentioned that you did 17 different jobs. I mean, give us one of the more dodgier roles prior to you becoming an author, and also tell us how you became an author. Is there a course? What was that moment where you took that career as being an author like seriously?
So being an author, there's no course, I don't think. I think a lot of people, I studied English literature at university. I was very aware that English and, reading stories and wanting to know about history. So English, history and geography were my favorite subjects at school. I knew I wanted something to do with them because it's all story driven, it's all people driven. And human rights is where my heart has always been. But being an author has been a lifelong journey. I wrote my very first book, which is basically a massive complaint about being a teenager when I was about 19. It was called Oh Please. I think it was like 13 chapters. It was so short. It was basically a massive complaint about life and being an Asian teenager, having to do exams, all this stuff. And I gave it in to my university teacher, and I remember her coming back to me and saying, Onjali, there's no plot. I think it's just you sound very unhappy. Are
It's
you
just a
okay?
rant. It's a rant.
But she said, keep on writing because it's funny. So she said, keep on writing. But it took me 9 years to find an agent. So an agent is who you need before you get to a publisher. And during that time, I was writing a trilogy about chocolate, because chocolate's just the best thing in the world. Why would you not want to write about chocolate? While that was, finally I got an agent. She was trying to sell the chocolate books. And during that time, while she was trying to do that, I wrote The Boy at the Back of the Class. And then that happened to sell. I wrote that in 7 weeks, and that sold
Oh wow.
almost immediately. And the book, the chocolate trilogy that I've been working on for 8 years and doing lots of research by eating chocolate, of course, that hasn't sold. So it's really amazing. It's really, you just don't know what story's going to sell at that moment. But yeah, it's a long journey. It's taken me about 12, 15 years to get here.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Going back to what were some of the quirkier jobs that you did prior to becoming? I'm gonna keep on asking until I get a
Oh,
really
that's
nice little
hilarious.
nugget.
I think the most quirkiest one was I worked at a sweet for a sweet trolley in Victoria Station for 1.5 years when I was doing my A levels.
Oh wow.
And I saw the most interesting things, like the most interesting people. There was one guy who would come in a very, dapper suit and tie, go through Victoria Station every morning, every day, and every evening, exactly 5:30 p.m., he would approach the sweet cart, open up his empty suitcase. There's a massive leather suitcase. It's empty. There's nothing
Just
inside,
front. It's just
and
complete
he would
front.
fill it with sweets for his kids. And I was like, I don't know how those
Wow.
kids aren't diabetic, because he bought, about £25 worth of chocolate every single day for them. So you just meet really interesting, wonderful people. And I worked in government departments. I worked for a Male magazine, which is like a lifestyle magazine, which any Muslim who has ever read it will
I,
know
I
of.
remember I remember ML magazine.
Yeah, yeah,
Are they
and
still
met
going?
some
I'm not
amazing
sure if they're
people.
still going. Are they still going?
I don't know. I think they're digital now, if they are
Yes.
still going. Yeah, but it was an amazing experience, and I met some of my best friends in the world, and the founders of Donate Pal through it. So, it opened my world. And then, yeah, some really amazing human rights charities as well. But I think the quirkiest one is definitely Victoria Station.
Selling sweets to the dude
Yeah,
with the empty suitcase.
yeah,
Um, uh, it's not the normal. I say normal in inverted commas, but it's not the usual kind of route for somebody from with South Asian heritage to become an author. There's those cliched, maybe slight stereotypes about being a doctor, being a lawyer, being an accountant, so on and so forth. So when you turned around to your folks and put pen to paper and said, "Look, guys, going to be a massive disappointment here. I'm going to be an author." How did that go down?
So it was a process. There wasn't a moment where I said I'm going to be an author to them. For my mum, it was typically she wanted me to be a doctor. My mum was absolutely adamant that I would be a doctor. But then at the age of 11, I discovered that I kind of faint at the sight of too much blood. So that wasn't going to happen. And then she wanted me to be have an office job, which is probably why I had 17 jobs. I was just trying to find a place that I could find a fit for myself. But the author thing was, so my mum is actually a poet. So when she was in her
Oh
teens,
wow.
she actually had poetry published in Bangladesh in newspapers. So she understood my love of writing, and she very much was the inspiration behind all my readings, all the books that we had, every library trip that she took us to in the rain, like all of it is down to my mum. And while she's never discouraged me, she always had the mantra, have something to back you up just in case, because we live in a world which isn't very friendly to South Asian people, especially if you're visibly Muslim as well. So you have to have a backup. So get your degree and then do what you want, but make sure you keep yourself funded, that you're independent. So that's a huge thing with her, and it's stuck with me, all my life. So the writing thing was, yeah, if it works for you, that's great, but just make sure that you have the office job in the background to help you going and keep you going. And a lot of my family, I think, they don't really take my authorship seriously. They're kind of like, oh, that's really nice. And I think because it's children's books, I was like, oh, okay. So I don't know, I don't think it's hit home to them yet that I have, that I am an author. So it's quite funny.
It's really nice to hear having that kind of support.
Mhm.
For once, again, maybe I'm looking at it from a slightly stereotypical point of view, but you tend to kind of have career choices like that, life choices like that,
Yeah,
somewhat questioned and almost kind of place a downer on that sort of
yeah,
choice, especially from family members who, understandably so, they just want to look after you. They want
yeah,
to look after your well-being. They want to make sure that once we're gone, this our son, daughter, relative is well looked after and can fend for herself and have a roof over her head and so on and so forth. So it's really nice to have somebody who can kind of understand and appreciate your kind of dreams as well, type of
yeah.
thing. I think that's so cool to have a parent like that. Did you know that you had a little bit of a different sort of parent when you were growing up compared to maybe some of your friends, or have you realized that sort of later on in life?
Um, so as a kid, so my mum's heritage is Yemen. So my great great grandparents were Yemeni, so she's not the typical kind of, not typical, but like, you know, she's not obviously Bengali when you see her. So in East London, where I was growing up in a very kind of Bengali council estate, she was always the odd one out anyway. So she was learning to drive. She's one of the first women on the estate to learn to drive. She was, you know, holding down a job, so she's working for a housing charity. She was taking ACCA courses online. Like she was different. And I remember in school, I had friends who would ask me, like, you know, where does your mum really come from? Where do you guys really come from? Like, what does she
Yeah.
like? You know, because their mums were usually homemakers, or they were doing part-time jobs, you know, or they weren't being seen with Agatha Christie books. My mum was always seen with an Agatha Christie book in her hand, because she was always just into murder mysteries. Yeah, so I was very aware that mum was a little bit different, and really cool. So I liked it. I liked being her daughter. So yeah, it was always there. But it wasn't something that was made a huge big deal out of it. Just that's the way it is, especially when you're kids. And it's only later that I came to appreciate that actually mum's efforts when we were kids, like to make sure we went to the library, that we maxed out our library cards every week, that, you know, we did have really, you know, strict television times, and, you know, all those kind of things we hated as kids. They were all for our benefit. So I'm very appreciative of everything she's
And
done for
what
us.
does she make of your career now? I mean, clearly,
Yeah.
multiple, you know, awards, 4 or 5 stories, storybooks, all printed. This isn't one of these where you're self-published. I mean, we're talking proper bona fide companies, you know, pushing and promoting your books. What does she make of it now?
Now she's as happy as can be, and I think now she sees, like, okay, she's going to be fine. She's not going to die in a ditch somewhere or like penniless. She's going to be okay. She still, I mean, she does get worried with making Herstory and O's refugee team, because the first time I went out to the refugee camp, she was absolutely terrified I wasn't coming back because of all the kind of horrible stigma that attaches itself to even the word refugee camp. So she has worries, of course, but she's so happy. And I remember when the boy at the back of the class won the Waterstones Award. She was my guest, and a best friend came with me as well. And I think that was a moment where there's a photo that someone took of her where she's just staring, and she's so happy, like she's just staring into space, and she's so happy, and there's no one around her, but she's just on her own. And that was a kind of look which said, okay, all the struggles were worth it, you know. And that's just, it makes my heart really happy. So all of this is really just to prove that she was right to support, and she was right to not push me into things that I didn't want to do. So yeah, it's all really her legacy as well.
That's awesome. It's not obviously easy running, you know, a couple of charities, NGOs, and being an author. How do you manage to balance the two? Are you able to balance the two? You know,
No, I'm always late for everything. Everything. So I was late 5 minutes for this call as well. So it's like,
no,
you know,
no, no, no.
I'm
You
always
you were
running.
good. You were good.
I'm
You were
always
good. I mean, I wasn't
I'm always
sitting there
running
doing
late.
this.
It's difficult at times, especially when we get some really tough cases. And unfortunately, I think being you know, a woman who's a woman of color and in a hijab, you get a lot of, there's more abuse to deal with. There's more going into a room and not being taken seriously. There's lots more fighting that we have to do just to be in the room to do the work we want to do. So all of that can take its toll, but it's just a question of prioritizing and trying to keep my hours, and trying to be strict with myself as well to give myself breaks. But yeah, it can be hard, but I love what I do, so it doesn't feel like a job. And I think it's a great honor to do like the charity works that I get to do, so and get to champion them through my books as well. So yeah, it's hectic. I don't get as much sleep as I should. Definitely need more holidays, but but I love all of it, so I wouldn't change anything.
I'm going to blow your trumpet a little bit. So the Blue Peter Book Award, nominated for the Carnegie Medal for Children's Book, shortlisted for the Jalop Prize, BAM Readers Award. The list goes on and on and on.
Oh,
In
that's so
terms
sweet
of
of you.
literary achievements, what stands out for you so far, and why?
What stands out? Do you know what? The awards are really lovely. And I think the Blue Peter Award was the most important to me because it was voted for by kids. And they're all wonderful. But I think the biggest thing that stood out for me is just how hungry our kids are to help make changes in the world. So with the boy at the back of the class, I wrote it really for myself. I was a bit ill when I was writing it. It was about a boy who walks into a, you know, classroom, and he is a refugee. The narrator just desperately wants to help. And I thought, oh my God, it's getting published. That's amazing. But I thought if we're really lucky, we might get some kids who know a refugee family, or there's a kid just like Ahmed walking into the class when they want to learn learn about who this kid is going to be. So I thought, if we're really lucky, it might get into some schools and we might have some kids pick it up. But for it to be taken up like it has been, and to be put in the curriculum for some schools, and for children to be studying it and then writing letters to the Queen. We had a girl write to the Queen last week and actually get a response back about wanting to help refugees, and the royal family should be helping refugees, and writing to the Home Office. I mean, kids are doing this because they've read the book, they've realised that there's something wrong in the world, that we're not helping refugees, and they want to do something about it. So that stuff is really eye-opening, and it's been just the most beautiful thing to witness. And one of my friends who comes out to the camps with me all the time, Yasmin, she said, I don't know what it is with this book, but I feel like there's a refugee somewhere who's given you a dua, and it's landed on that book. So to see kids and adults mobilizing as well. And I think one of the very first letters I got when the book was published was from a granddad. He was one of the very first readers. He emailed my agent, and he said, basically, my family are the descendants of Holocaust survivors, and for the first time ever, my grandchildren, after reading your book, have come to ask me what my refugee experience has been. And I'm now 89, and that really just, I was like, oh my God. So we're having conversations starting, and it's the same with Somali refugees. I've had so many Somali parents come forward and say, look, my kids are asking me about this, and they've never asked me about this. So those kind of moments are my most standout moments, and the awards are wonderful, and of course they've helped the book just go absolutely stratospheric in so many ways, but those moments are really amazing.
Going back to your books, and I mean, you've written 4, to my understanding: Boy at the Back of the Class, The Star Outside My Window, The Day We Met the Queen, The Night Bus Hero. Which is your baby? Which is your favorite?
Kids ask me this all the time, bro. I can't answer because they're kind of like the fingers of your hand. They're all attached to you. They're all a bit different, but you need them, But I would say my baby is, I think it has to be in terms of ease and the fact that it led to all the others being created, The Boy at the Back of the Class, because that book just came flowing out of me. The others were much harder to write, and it led to all the other books being given the chance to be written. So yeah, that's kind of my baby.
What was it like? You mentioned the refugee camps a couple of times. What was it like with the first time you walked in, um, and saw this? I mean, a lot of the time they are chaotic places by definition. What was it like when you first saw, this picture um, in front of you? What went through your head?
So I was really naive. So the refugee camps I've been working in and trying to help out since 2015 is the camps in Calais and Dunkirk, which is in France. And the only reason why I picked those places, and France in particular, was A, it was close to home. So if everything went disastrously wrong, I could just hop on the Eurotunnel and come back. And number two, after Aylan Kurdi's case came out in 2015, that story of the little Syrian boy whose body was being carried away by a Turkish soldier, I was desperate to find women and children that we could help, because as is the case today, you open up a newspaper and you'll see pictures of young men who are refugees, but you won't ever see children or elders or women who are pregnant or anything like that. So Ireland Kurdic was kind of like my wake up moment. So I went out to the camps in Calais and Dunkirk. I remember landing, and we had no idea where the camps were. We didn't know anyone on the ground at that time. So my friends and I went out in a van. We got some tents and sleeping bags and food, money, and whatever we could together, drove out, and we were asking for directions, where's the nearest refugee camp we can go to. Finally found our way. And I thought that when refugees landed somewhere in a place like Europe, which is meant to be like the beacon of human rights, around the world, I thought it would be structured, UN, kind of UNICEF, whatever camps, that were monitored and controlled and organized, and instead what we found were refugees sleeping in mud and under trees and in sewers, and it really broke my heart, and I was devastated, and it didn't feel like we were in Europe anymore. And I remember my team just repeating this: it doesn't feel like we're in Europe. Like, where are we? This doesn't make any sense. Why are there children trying to shovel pebbles and stones out of the way so they can lie down for 5 minutes? Why are there old people trying to chop down trees for firewood? Like, it doesn't make sense. And then on top of that, you have police chasing them and them trying to run away. It's just absolutely manic. And I thought when we landed, that everything would be over in a year. I was absolutely convinced there's no way that any European country is going to allow this to go on, and still be a supposed beacon of human rights. But it's been, what, 5.5, 6 years, and of course before I landed it'd been going on for a long time as well. So it's heartbreaking, and I think it's I don't know, it puzzles me because I still don't understand why any one community can treat another community of human beings like they are doing to refugees.
I was going to, I mean, I was going to say that if, I mean, it's not trying to downplay at all, but if there was a magic wand, or if you had an unlimited supply of cash, of money, what would you do? I mean, what do you think the number one problem is in these sorts of situations? Is it the lack of empathy by Western governments? Is it just political insecurity in where these people are, and these refugees are coming from? What to you, to your understanding, what do you think the issue is, and how are we ever going to get to resolve something like this?
There are so many, Ibra. I think we can talk about this all day. I mean, if I had a magical wand, then I would obviously stop the wars and the land grabbing and the resource grabbing that's going on right now, by largely Western powers to overtake resources that poorer countries have, which cause all these disasters and warfares. But if I can't stop that, then I think the thing that's happening on the ground is, I think this is largely there is a deep racism that's going on, and most of these people that are running or on the run are Arabs. They are, black people, they are people of color, and I often think that if these people were white, would we have the same reaction to them? And my gut reaction is no. And on top of that, there's of course faiths involved, so large majority of the refugees are Muslim. There is so much to tackle, and it needs to be tackled from all sides. So at O's Refugee Aid Team, we do lobby the government, we do get children writing to MPs, we do, ask people to say, look, you don't have to donate. Donation isn't the only thing that you can do. You can lobby, you can spread the word. You can also question what you're seeing in the newspapers, because all of this media speak that we have around refugees is so damaging, it's so othering. So one way to tackle and humanize them so that we can help them more, is to do that, is to deconstruct what we think we know about them and why they're traveling so far. And then if you take that angle and then you add the things that we can do on the ground. So for example, right now what we're doing is, because this past year in a pandemic we haven't been able to get out as often as we would love to do, so we've been working in other ways. So we need organizations to work together, governments to actually acknowledge that they have humanitarian laws that they have signed up to, that they are breaking themselves in torturing and abusing refugees in the way that they are, and get them to face up to those abuses and say, look, this can't go on. And with the UK government, it's the same. So, we have the UK government paying the French government to do these kinds of things and to create bigger borders, and, all these talks about putting refugees on ships while they're being processed. I mean, these are human beings we're talking about, but we don't see them as such, and governments try to make sure we don't see them as such. So there's a lot of things we can do. And if I had endless pots of money, I would just want to focus on getting Europe as a whole and Britain and all the world, all the world's countries working together to find a way to stop the reasons for why people are having to flee, and also, whilst that's not happening, to forge routes where people can seek asylum, legally, safely, be reunited with their families, and in the meantime, if they're able to go back and rebuild the countries, they can do so, because that's what a lot of refugees want. They want to go back home. They don't see this as the place they want to come and live forever. It's a stopping place until they can go back home again. So yeah, it's a long answer, I'm sorry, but there's so
No,
many
that's
things.
okay. I mean, I've worked in the charity sector as well, and it's a place where it can be incredibly rewarding. It's also very, very demanding, and you come
Yeah.
across scenarios and situations which really shake the core of your belief and existence and comfort, when you see other people in such discomfort, and the ugly scenes, and things like refugee camps and things like that. But there are those moments when you think, the work that I'm doing, as somebody in the charity sector, is making a difference. is there an example? Is there like an anecdote where you thought, uh, you know what? Yes, it is hard. The blood, the guts, and the tears, and the sort of running around, fundraising, and so on and so forth. But you know what? I'm making a difference here. It's actually worth it.
Yeah, I think we have those moments all the time, and I don't think anyone would keep going. If it was only blood, guts, and tears, there's just no way you could keep going, because you'd lose faith in not just humanity but yourself as well. There are so many moments. So, for example, the boy at the back of the class was written and dedicated to a baby called Rayhan, and that was one of my key moments. As yes, we're doing something good, which was we tried to help Rayhan's mum, who was 8.5 months pregnant, as she landed in Calais after a 20,000-mile journey trying to get to safety, and trying to help her, and just getting some baby goods out to her, making sure she could have money for medicines, and
Mm,
have that baby safely, was a massive thing. And one of the projects under OJFJ team is Maison Sesame, which is a house that we have helped found, and that we donate to when we can. And it's a stopping place. It's a place that refugees who are really vulnerable, like pregnant women, people who have serious illnesses, people who are really vulnerable, can come and stay in and live in for 6 months at a time, and be safe. And to see them and to hear their stories and see how they blossom when they have a bed to sleep in, and they have warm food, and they have a roof and a room of their own, is really, really wonderful. And getting to meet just incredible volunteers. I think one of the things that I would do if I had endless pots of money is create a happy channel, because I don't think we need a happy news channel where
happy
we
news. Yeah.
hear and we see the most amazing people doing amazing things in the world, and I get to meet so many of them through my works. So yeah, everything
Are you saying the BBC, Sky News, and Fox aren't enough? Is that what you're trying to say? I'm
we
trying to
have.
read between the lines here, Anjali.
No political comments on those channels, but we just need a happy channel. That's all I'm saying. But I think that stuff's coming out as well, especially on YouTube and things. People, there's a reason why we watch cat videos. We need breaks from the blood, sweat, and tears. We need to hear about good things and see beautiful things. And I think that's intrinsic in all of us. So yeah, I have so many moments, endless moments that keep me going.
Um, we're living through a pandemic. How have you found it as an author, as well as somebody who's involved in a couple of charities, Making Herstory and Oz Refugee team? How have you found that working in such strange and fairly scary times?
It's been frustrating because I'm not a person who stays at home very often. So my mum's really happy because she's like, "This is the first year I've had you at home since you were 17. Do you realise that? For this length of time? Because usually I'm going to schools, or I'm doing events, or I'm going wherever, or I'm flying off to somewhere for a break." But it's been frustrating. So for two reasons. So from the charity angle, we're a very physical charity that's Making Herstory as well as OJFG. We like to get out. We like to donate our stuff. We need to, galvanize, do all this stuff, do talks, do events. So having all of that cancelled has been really, really tough, and especially not going out to the camps and not going to the refuge shelters over here has been really incredibly tough. And the second way it's been really frustrating is, as an author, I like to be in cafes. I like to be watching people and hearing stories, and just your typical kind of New York kind of scene from a movie where you're in a cafe trying to act cool. But I like being surrounded by people. I like going to galleries. I like to get ideas from places. So not having any of that and being stuck in a room, which is, alhamdulillah, we have, I'm so blessed to have a house, so blessed to have a room of my own, has been hard. So it's been harder to write the books that I have to write at the moment. But yeah, it's just frustrations, but then we find new ways of working. And with Making Herstory and OJFJ team, we've found new ways of still being on the ground without being there, which has really been incredible. It's been a huge learning curve, but it strengthened us as well. And hey, with the books, I can do it. I can write in a room. So yeah, it's okay. We can get through it. And it's not, considering what's happened out in the world and just how many people we've lost, and people really struggling to even put food on the table right now, you can only whinge about these things so far. So yeah.
Well, you touched on a little bit about raising funds, but as a charity, what um, has it been like, or what was it like pre-COVID and during COVID? Have you sort of felt the pinch? I mean, I was speaking to somebody last week, a CEO of a charity, Voyage, and they seem to have bucked the trend. They were an organization that really were thriving under under COVID, bizarrely, and it's slightly counterintuitive, but that's just their situation. How have you guys found it?
So we actually took a step back from fundraising. So what happened in very early on in the pandemic last year was we have reserves, and started using the reserves in order to send out PPE kits and things. But then those were getting stolen en route, and all these crazy things were happening. So we stopped, and we also noted that the charity world in large, everyone seemed really desperate. Everyone was calling out for funds. Everyone was putting out new calls, and everyone was exhausted just giving as well. So we put breaks on ourselves for about 4 months where we didn't do any fundraising at all. We thought we're just going to try and figure out new ways of working, and then when we're back and we know what we're doing, then we're going to ask for our, for a little bit more help. Now, luckily with us, we are not government funded, so we don't do any applications. We're not, reliant on trusts or anything like that. So all of our supporter bases, they're very loyal, and they're long term as well. So we have monthly donors as well as one-off donors, and our monthly donors are growing enough for us to be able to pull back on doing big asks, and we only ask for what we need. So once our supporters know that, oh god, this is happening and they really need it, then they'll just stop on board and they'll spread the word by word of mouth. So we've been really lucky. We've actually grown, I would say, with O's Refugee team probably triple fold over the year, and then with Making Herstory probably double, because we've had more
Wow.
people come on board. And I think people are very aware of smaller charities doing the work rather than massive charities who need lots of funds for rent and workers and all the rest of it, which is not to say they don't need it, of course they do, but they've become more and more aware of smaller charities doing the work and wanting to support them as well. Yeah, so we've been really lucky.
Do you think that's a trend that's going to possibly last? There does seems to be there does seem to be a kind of cultural shift from bigger entities to kind of smaller independents, whether it's the retail world. People are beginning to leave the big shops and thinking, I'm going to find something on handmade on Etsy, or visit the
Mhm.
local high street. Again, the bigger charities, for anecdotally speaking, there are, people are beginning to sort of maybe look at the smaller charities and thinking, right, that's really my focus. That's exactly what I want to be giving to, rather than giving money, pots of cash to these slightly monolithic sort of organizations.
Mhm.
Do you think is that something that you've experienced, and do you think that's a kind of long-term trend that we're seeing?
Definitely, and I think it's really, I think people are looking closer to home. So especially with us, because like our families are South Asian or Arab, we want to send all our money abroad. We never think about the person who's sleeping rough on the streets, just down the road. Very rarely. And I think there's been a greater awareness of, oh no, my neighbor actually needs help, and I didn't know about that before. Or these kids are going, they're starving in my local neighborhood and they need breakfast clubs and food clubs and whatever. So let's help them now. So I think that is definitely a trend. I think it doesn't mean that the bigger charities need to suffer as a result. They will hopefully always get help as well. But I think there's definitely an awareness that, hey, there's stuff going on in my local area. There are people in my local area who are stepping up to help, and I can be a part of it. And even with myself, like I bought so much stuff off Etsy this year. Like my bank was like, "Is this really you?" I'm like, "Yes, it is. I'm supporting Etsy, small businesses through Etsy." So it's kind of, there is an awakening amongst all of us. And because we can't get out, we need people to do the jobs for us. So we are looking more towards local people who are doing it for us, rather than kind of faceless machines who might be out there.
Here's a
I don't know
loaded
if you
question.
call them machines, but like faceless organizations where we
No, no, I
don't really know
understand.
the people.
I
Yeah.
understand. Not bots.
No, not bots.
Here's a loaded question for you,
Oh
Anjali.
gosh.
Do you think charities in the UK embrace tech, uh, or in your experience, are they a little bit reserved, a little bit shy to sort of jump on board? I mean, you guys were great. You jumped on board straight onto the Donate platform. But do you think, as a generally speaking, do you think charities are a little bit wary of donation, not necessarily donation platforms, but tech and sort of people in the ether who are trying to raise funds?
Um, I think there's a suspicion or a worry that they won't last. So they want to see these platforms actually last their ground, you know. So it's kind of like, so for example, like crowdfunder and things, I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, but that's really great for small people to want to do their thing. But now charities more and more are going on to crowdfunder because they realize, oh, actually it's working and it's not going anywhere and it's actually going to be around for a while. So I think, yeah, there is awareness, but also I am one of the most petrified people of any kind of new tech that happens. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know nothing about this. What's going on? How do I get my head around it? And so I wait to see how it's usually, you know, going to be worked on, how you know, how feasible it is for us to take it on. Is this the audience that we want to have? So it's kind of, all of these questions do crop up. But with you guys, because it was such an easy, simple platform that even someone like me could come on board and be like, oh, okay, I get it. So like, you know, you made it easy. So yeah, it's just, I don't think it's awareness, I think it's just caution. And also because the bigger the charity you are, the more people you have to answer to. So if you jump on board and it doesn't work, then the fallout is greater. So it's just caution, I think.
Finally, can you give us any updates? One, about the charities that you're working with, and secondly, anything in the pipeline regarding books and all things literary?
All things literary. God, we'd be here for a while. No, literally nothing going on. So with the charities, we're so excited because with O's Refugee team, we in the pandemic, I never thought this is like beyond a dream. So we actually became co-partners of an actual warehouse. We have our first warehouse. So when this is
Oh
over,
wow!
we'll actually be able to land and go to our warehouse and be able to stock and all the rest of it. It's already being used by our partner mobile refugee support team. And with Making Herstory, we are going into our first building projects and renovation projects. So we are working with 3 shelters to develop therapy and counselling rooms, because the pandemic has been horrific for women and children stuck in women's refuges. It's literally a room. So we bought televisions, we bought them books, we bought wherever they could to stay occupied, keep their minds healthy. So now we're just taking it a step bigger. And yeah, we'll continue with our suitcase appeals and lobbying the government about refugees and women's rights as well. So all of that will continue and hopefully grow and get some more champions in. And with regards to the books,
Give us an
so I
exclusive. Give us an exclusive.
exclusive. So there's a book coming out in 1st of July for
Oh wow!
Barrington's.
Okay.
And that's called The Great Food Bank Heist, and it's been inspired by Marcus Rashford, who is an absolute genius, and I love this
Who's
guy.
Marcus Rashford?
Who's
No.
Marcus
Okay.
Rashford? Have you been on planet Mars?
Okay.
What's going on? Have you just landed?
It's
No, I
it's
think
a
he's,
Manchester United thing. I just, being a Liverpool fan, I
well,
mean,
I'm Newcastle United and I can still love Marcus
okay,
Rashford.
no, we've got
We're
time for
okay.
Marcus. We've got
I
time
think
for
he's
Marcus.
a golden card. I think anyone's allowed to like him. I think he's done phenomenal work
Mm.
for the food banks. So the story was inspired by him. So that's coming out on the 1st of July. It's called The Great Food Bank Heist. And I'm just in the middle. I'm meant to be submitting today, but I've not finished it. The 5th book for Hatchets, which will be called The Line Above the Door, and it's about racism and missing histories, because I like to tackle really easy, light subjects, as you do. So yeah, wish me luck. Please do the offer that. Thank you.
No, I'm sure you'll be fine, inshallah. Angela, I'm going to leave it there.
Okay.
Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. You've been awesome. Thank you very much for
Thank
taking
you. You're very kind.
time out today and giving us insights into the world of being an author, and also kind of talking about Making Her Story and O's Refugee Aid Team. Thank you very much. Honestly, wish you the best of luck
Thank you.
going forward, because all amazing projects, very worthwhile. And I'm not going to say anything else apart from spread the word, and obviously we'll do the same for you guys.
Thank you so much for having us on Donate Pal, and making it so easy for us to be part of that world as well.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Anjali. Take care.
Bye.
Cheers.